We're learning now Yehoshua perek Yud Aleph, the 11th chapter in Sefer Yehoshua through our journey through Nach. And now things get a little more serious because of let's recap to where we are right now. Up till now, we've seen an incredible alliance of powers in the south. So Israel had to fight in defense of their ally, their beleaguered ally, the Givonites. And in defending them, they actually conquer most of the heartland of Israel down south. And this southern region of Israel now becomes under Israeli control, Israel control. Now what happens is we hear about an alliance in the north. So the northern tribes now respond. And we hear that it starts with the king of Chatzor. The king of Chatzor now sends messengers to the king of Madon, Shimron, Achshaph, to these neighboring kingdoms. We'll see in a second where they are. And he says to them, and we're talking generally speaking around this area here, the Galil and the northern Galil, moving into what we have as today Lebanon. That area of kings now form an alliance against Israel. And they gather in a place called Mei Marom. Look at Pasuk K. Vayivadu kol ha-melachim ha'ele la'yavohu vayachanu yachtav el Mei Marom ilachem im Yisrael. They decide to fight against Israel. And we hear, in fact, that this is not just a regular alliance. We hear that they have Am Rav Kachol Asher Sfas Hayom Larav. They have so many soldiers, it's like the sand on the beach. That's how many soldiers they are. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers. V'sus v'rechev Rav Me'od. And they not only have soldiers, but they also have cavalry. So we have horses, we have chariots. It's a terrifying alliance. So Hashem speaks to Yehoshua and assures him in Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, Al tira mipnehem, do not fear them, ki machar ka'es at this time tomorrow, on Echino Senes Kulam Chalolim Lifnei Yisrael, they're all going to be corpses in front of Israel. Es Susayhem Ta'aker, you should hamstring their horses. Es Marka Voisayhem Tisaret Ba'esh, you'll burn their chariots. And so it is, the Israelites take a tour. Remember, they're encamped at Gilgal. They move their way up to the north and they fight against this conglomeration, Pitz'om, suddenly, and they conquer them. And in fact, it says they pursue them up towards Sidon. Anybody know where Sidon is? So it's not even on this map. It's further north here. So they're pursuing them all the way up the coast to the Phoenician city of Sidon. Today it's in Lebanon. This is Tyre over here in the north. They go all the way up to the further north to Sidon, where they pursue them, and this is a resounding victory. There afterwards they come back and they burn each city to the ground. So they kill everybody and they burn Chatzor, which is the city which instigated all of this, and the rest of the cities they conquer, and they burn Sidon, Chatzor, down to the ground. Remember, if you go back to the format of how Israel was told to fight these wars, remember they were told to offer peace, leave, or be killed, right? And these cities clearly were not asking for peace. Right, so they waged war. They started this war, and they were killed, and everyone was killed in them because they took that option of the three. Now,
one day, literally,
no. So actually, we're going to see in a second. Look in Pasuk Yud Ches. It says, "Yamim Rabim asa Yehoshua es kol hamlachim ha'ele milchama." It was many. The word Yamim literally means days, but it means many years. We'll see in a second. It took many years. This campaign in perek Yud Aleph is not like the campaign in perek Yud. In perek Yud, we're told that it was Pam Achas. It was one tour of duty. This one sounds like there was many tours of duty. It took many years to actually completely conquer the northern territories of Israel. And then the Tanakh reflects on this and says, in Yud Tes, Lo ha'esa ir asher hishlima es b'nei Yisrael bilti hachivi oshrei givon es hakol la'achul ba'milchama. There was not a single Canaanite city, except for Givon that we met last time, who made peace, except for Givon. There was no other city that made peace. And the Tanakh tells us why. Why was it? So you can give all the military suggestions you want, but Tanakh tells us, Kima'eis Hashem hoisa. It was Hashem's intuition that He put, L'chazek es libam, to make their hearts stronger, L'kras milchama es Yisrael, to rather fight against Israel, L'man achrimam, in order they should be destroyed. Meaning, they could have easily taken the peace route, and then they would have been there. But Hashem made it that they were like good male egos. They don't back down, right? And so that's what happened, and therefore they got destroyed, right? You know, it was amazing. Once in AIPAC, I remember hearing two women senators, like two, veterans from war, a Democrat and a Republican, discussing the politics in the Middle East. And I said, if this world was won by women, oh my gosh, there'll be much less wars. It's like all these big male egos running around, and my territory and my army, and So nonetheless, Hashem made it that these folks all made the wrong decision, and they all got destroyed except for Givon. And that's what happened. And then finally at the very end, Vayavo Yehoshua ba'esahi in Pasuk Chof Aleph, Vayachres es Anakim min Ahar, min Chevron, min Dvir, min Anav. He destroys the Anakim. We have to see why they're given special attention. They're in the south. And Lo Nishar Anakim, this tribe of Anakim were not left by Eretz Yisrael, Rak ba'aza, begat uvashtod nisharu, only in the area of Gaza. We'll get to that in a second, why they remain. For a second. Okay, so let's hone in for a second where these battles took place. If you just take a look at the map page, to see what this, for a second, the more honed in map, and turn it sideways so you can see it a little better. So we see just the cities that we're talking about over here are Chatzor. Okay, Chatzor is just to the north of the Galilee Sea, so that's just to the north of the Galilee. That's the ringleader. Then we have the cities of Madon, Achshaf. Machdon is to the left of the Galilee. Achshaf is further to the west of the Galilee. We also have the city of Shimron, which is also to the west of the Galilee, so to the west of the Kinneret. So all of these cities are basically to the north and to the west of the Kinneret Sea. Right? That's where this alliance is being formed. What is interesting is that the place of the battle is a place called Mei Marom. Now you'll see that today some people suggest that this is none other than Meiron itself, which means this is unique in being the first battle that started with an Opshern and a Hasidic Shatish. This was a very holy battle. There was in fact music playing during the course of the battle. However, even though that is generally accepted that Mei Marom might refer to Meiron, it doesn't seem to be that that's logical for a number of reasons. Look at the map for a second. Tell me why it's not logical that Marom is the place, that Meiron is the place. Because where they put Meirom there is where Meiron is today. Why is it not a logical place for this battle to take place?
It's hilly. If they have chariots, they're not going
So first of all, if you look at the topography, it's in the center of mountains. If you've ever driven to Meiron recently, we were there a few years ago, it's in the middle of the mountains. I mean, like the parking lot's on a slope. Right? And we know that this war was fought with chariots. So the military equipment's not working in that area. That's number one. Number two is, what's another reason why this can't be? It cannot be that Meiron is Mei Marom. It's too far north. Meaning, look at the alliance of the kings over here, right? Shimron, Achshaf, Madon, which are three of the kings who are called into this alliance, are to the south of Meiron, right? Which would mean to say is, why would they gather to the north of their villages, thereby actually leaving their villages defenseless, taking their soldiers defenseless to Israel? And why would Israel go so far north? Why would they go into such territory, meaning that they're leaving themselves completely vulnerable, having the villages of the enemy behind them? That doesn't make sense, which is why a number of suggestions, if you look in the Dat Mikra Tanakh, the suggestion of Yehuda Kil makes is that Mei Maron is actually referring to an area in the Jezreel Valley, in the Valley of Yisrael, which is further south just by Shimron, which makes sense because number one is the chariots can ride there, and number two is it's south of all of these cities. If you're trying to defend your cities, you're not moving away from the enemy. You're moving in front of the goalposts, right, to defend your cities, which makes more sense. So, although if you look at your average Tanakh map, they will give us Marom as the area of Meiron today. It doesn't seem to make sense that was the original battle, at least then. It makes more sense it was in the Jezreel Valley, which makes sense that's where the war front would be, defending the villages behind you and Israel not going into enemy territory so deep, which makes a little more sense as well. But nonetheless, Meiron, one should still go visit, but remember that we're talking about a much later era, an era well over 1,500 years later, that becomes more popular. Okay, now a few things over here is, let's say you are a Canaanite, general. Let's say you're the king of Achshaf or the king of Chatzor, and you receive news of what's just happened. I mean, folks, we're talking about meteorite showers and sun standing still, and even if you're going to rationalize those things, like, what are you doing? Like why are you calling alliance? Didn't we hear the story beforehand? Like, what's going on over here? How could you be so foolish as to call everybody into battle against Israel right now? It just doesn't make sense. So you could say, well, Hashem inspired them to do the wrong thing. And that's very true. But in the Hashem's inspiration, Hashem doesn't put notes under pillows. He makes people think. So what's the logical rationale that they're working with over here? It's hard to understand. You'd think they'd learned their lesson, right? And they didn't learn their lesson. So there's a few things to consider. Number one is, and this the Ralbag points out, is that whenever you fight by yourselves, you're much more vulnerable. And perhaps they thought the alliance, even the alliance of Jerusalem and Hebron and all the other southern alliance, maybe it was still a small alliance. Here we hear that this army is a Amrav Kechol Hayam. This is the largest army that has fought against Israelites beforehand. It is like the sand upon the sea. The meaning to say where there's hundreds of thousands of soldiers. That's number one. Number two is where they have what's called QME, qualitative military edge, right? So they have an edge in the sense that they got military equipment that we've not met beforehand, and that's called the Rechev, the chariot. Israelites are infantry. They do not have cavalry, right? So now we're meeting a whole new level, which means in their minds they're probably thinking we can win. It's interesting if you research the ancient wars. When you look at cavalry, there's a whole race between the different nations as to get the QME, the qualitative military edge in the Middle East. The Egyptians have chariots, the Canaanites have chariots, and the Chivites have chariots. The Chivites are a subsection of the Canaanites, but nonetheless, the Egyptian chariots are faster chariots, and they used to use them with bowmen. So they'd have one driver, and then they'd have their longbows that they would use essentially as a platform for archery. With the Canaanites, did it differently. The Canaanites had much heavier chariots drawn by more horses, and their goal would be to break the ranks of infantry, right? So they would have a shield bearer, a swordman, and a driver, and they would be much heavier, slower chariots, but they'd break through the ranks of infantry. This is what they're thinking right now. We'll get to Rechev Barzel in a second, what that means when we get to Perek Yud Zayin, because we're not in the Iron Age yet, but we talk about iron chariots. We have to figure out what this is. We're in the Bronze Age right now, but we have to figure out what this means as to what the military is. But clearly in their minds, they think they have a military edge. They think that they're going to win this war. There's another piece of this over here, which the Chidah suggests, and that is that there's also an element of anger. And this is really important, not to underestimate the idea of pride, disgrace, and shame in war. And that is that if you remember how they killed the kings of the Canaanites in the south, Yehoshua pulled them out of the caves and told his officers to put their feet on their neck before killing them as a demonstration of power. And the Chidah says that was a very disgraceful way of killing these kings. And the kings of the north felt affronted. And if you think that affront is not enough to make war, then read about 1973. Right? Egypt knew they could not beat Israel. Part of the reason they went to war in 1973 was to reclaim pride, even if they knew they could not win that war as well. It was against the concept Israel had, which they knew they couldn't win, they didn't have air superiority, but they still went to war. It's really interesting to notice that people will still go to war when there's a disgrace, when there's a shame that needs to be fixed, and this seems to be this battle as well. So it's important to understand all the different thoughts, the rationale that's at play over here when it comes to battle. And the most curious thing about this battle, more than any other battle, is that they decided to hamstring the horses and to burn the chariots. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever visited the Latrin Tank Museum. It's really worthwhile. They actually do a lot of training there. So if you ever go there, there's a lot of soldiers usually training. It's the center of of which division in the army? Shirion, tanks, right? The Black Beret. So if you go into, that's where they, in fact, a friend of mine who graduated from Shirion, that's where they do the final tekes in the basic training is there at Latrim. But for all consumers, it's also a tank museum, right? So you go to Israel, visit the tank museum, and you'll notice something interesting. In the semicircle of tanks that they have outside, there's the inside and the outside. On the outside, they have a number of Egyptian and Syrian tanks that were recommissioned, because remember, these were supplied by the Soviets. They were recommissioned by Israel. So you see an Egyptian tank with the Israeli star on it, because what they do is when you capture a piece of equipment which is that expensive and that advanced, what you simply do is you retrain it for Israel. Especially when you didn't have money and there was an arms embargo, and only France was allowing Israel sale of arms in the Czech Republic until the French stopped in 1967, just before the Six-Day War. Wow, amazing how our allies seem to work. But if you don't have a supplier before America came into the scene, then you use the enemy's tanks. So you ask yourself, why were they burning the chariots? Paint the Star of David. David wasn't born yet. Paint the Israeli. Do something else. Make an Israeli chariot and use it for war. Very, very strange. So some of the academics say, well, this is to prevent the use of it, proliferation of arms for in the future. Meaning, burn their chariots so they won't be used against you. But I ask you folks, is that the best military sense? They have the technology. They're just going to make more chariots, right? It's not like you killed the chariot making, factory in Syria overnight. Did the commando mission dropped off. That's not how it worked. So why are you destroying it? The reason why the academics are incorrect is because it wasn't Yehoshua who decided to burn the chariots and hamstring their horses. It was God. God said, Yehoshua, burn their chariots. So it wasn't Yehoshua saying, we don't know how to work this. Where are the keys? So let's burn it. That wasn't what was happening, right? He was burning this because God said so. So why did God say so, is the question. And the Ralbag says something really startling, which is important to understand. In the military, the landscape that we're finding ourselves, it's important to realize this in source 4. He says as follows. Actually, I apologize. It's not source 4. It's source 5. Thank you. Different for my notes. So the Ralbag says, "V'tzivo la'akor suseim l'saref markvoseim shlo yikhum Yisrael v'yavtichu bom binyan al milchamos." Don't take their tanks. Essentially, this is the tank of the warfield in those days, and think that that's why you're going to be successful in the future. 2 reasons. Number one is, don't think it was because of your military prowess that you won this battle, so burn it down. Number two, there's not going to be a reminder. There's no chariot museum you're going to put these up in to show that you're in charge. And number two is, the future battles, you're not winning because of chariots. So as much as Israel has to rely on their own military decisions, is a reminder. God says, it's not you. I want you to remember that these wars are not you. And this is a very important moment, because Hashem is not throwing hailstones and he's not holding sun still in this battle, but he's still reminding them that it's not you. And that's a very hard balance that we seem to remind. You know that today, just today, Israel released the Iron Beam. Unbelievable. Cost $3 to destroy a rocket. Up till now, it used to cost $100,000 to destroy a rocket because the interceptors were so expensive, right? This is the first time. It's really important, but it's also really important to remember that where this comes from. It's this balance that we struggle with, because we have a sense of pride. Look what human beings, 20 years of research, amazing. Raphael, go for it. In fact, I invited Ari Sachar to come this year to visit. He says, I'm sorry, Raphael put me on a very important project recently. I'm very busy right now. So I would love to see him. He's an incredible human being. So that's what happens. Now, by the way, how do you hamstring horses? Just curious, in case you're interested. It's cutting the tendons that connect their hooves, right? So these horses are now lame. They're not going to battle anymore. So you say to yourself, doesn't the Torah not like that kind of thing? That's called Tzar Baalei Chaim. So in Rav Melamed's book called Panini Halach, in the section of Tzar Baalei Chaim, he deals with this based on the Gemara and says, yes, when there's a higher calling than there is, Hashem said, in this case, you need to do this. I don't want you to kill them. They can still be work animals, but I don't want them to be army horses. So therefore, take care of this, and there's no Tzar Baalei Chaim. Now, it's an interesting question as to why did this? Well, first of all, let's take a look. Did Yehoshua do everything they were supposed to do? Is an important question. It says he did everything like Hashem commanded Moses. And the Malbim adds an important point, and I think this is important for our generation. In the middle of the seventh source, he says, in the Malbim, he says, "V'gam aval pi she'im haya hakivush al yedei Moshe haya yoser nisimi ma shaya yedei Yeshua mikol makom la nishtani davar mitzvahs kivush havachil." If Moshe had been leading this war, it would have been all miraculous. But it wasn't. It was Yehoshua leading it. So it was less miraculous. But he did whatever he was supposed to do, even though he had less heavenly help. It's important to realize that, because sometimes we think to ourselves, if yesteryear's generation of leaders was here, they would do a much better job. They have different skills, right? But just remember that we're dealing with this generation's leaders, and they're trying to do the best they can. They're on mission. That's the Tanakh is telling us. It's on mission, even though it was different. Now, how long does this take? So it doesn't tell us. It tells us Yomim Rabim, which can mean many days or many years. How long precisely? So we have a clue from later on in perek Yud Beis. Here's what it says. This is Kalev speaking. We're going to get there, God willing, in a little bit. Kalev explains, and he says he's trying to claim the territory of where? Where's Kalev get, by the way? He gets the area of Hebron. Right, because remember, he went to pray in the city of the forefathers before he went on his mission as one of the Meraglim. And he says, and Moshe Rabbeinu gives him a promise that the land which you stood upon, you're going to get. So now Kalev, as one of the only survivors of the desert, right, from that age, meaning in that age band of 20 to 60, he was the only person alongside Yehoshua who survived, right, because he was one of the good Meraglim. He now comes to claim his territory. After the wars are finished, he says, I need my territory. So listen to what he says. He's going to help us in terms of giving us the time frame. He says, "Va'ata," and now after these wars, "Hinei hechyeh Hashem osi," God let me live, "Kasher diber," as He promised, "Ze 45 shana." It's been 45 years. Me'az Diber Hashem es hadavar hazeh, when he gave me this promise, El Moshe, to Moses, Asher alach Yisrael b'midbar v'ata hinei hayom ben chamesh v'shvanim shana. I am now 85 years old. And he goes on to say that I'm still vibrant, I'm still working, and everything is going well. Thank God. Amazing, right? So he's lived a long and successful life, and he's staking his claim on Hebron. So let's do the math quickly over here. So how many years from this pasuk do we know that it took to conquer the land of Israel?
About 5.
It should have been 7.
Good. That's the problem. So it sounds like. Remember, let's do a recap. There's 40 years in the desert, right? So there's 40 years in the desert, and he's saying that 45 years ago I received this promise. So that means to say there will be 5 years of conquest. Now the trick is,
the Meraglim was the second
excellent, the Meraglim happened in the second year of the Israel in the desert, which means that it was really 38 years in the desert, right? Which means 45 years later, it's 7 years of conquest where he's making his claim over here, which leads us, this is where Chazal get this pasuk like that it was 7 years of conquest because of your Kalev's very, very graceful disclosing of his age. Right, so that's how we get to this point. Just as an FYI, it's worthwhile knowing that not everybody did the math correctly. So, for instance, Josephus in Antiquities, if you look at the next source, in source 9, he says the 5th year was now past, and there was none of the Canaanites remained any longer. He completely did the math wrong. Right? So Josephus, again, is a plagiarizer in general. Right? So when he's writing Jewish history, he read this pasuk, but he miscalculated. He took it as it happened in the first year, based on our initial assumption, but Josephus is incorrect in this case over here. Okay, he didn't read things carefully. Now, let's go a little further. So we say, why did it take so long? I mean, the first one, it sounds like it was literally a day or 2 days, maybe even a few weeks to conquer the southern region. The northern region we know takes now years, right? So it's going to take 7 years to get here. Why did it take so long? So the Medrash Tanchuma says a very shocking thing. It really is a very shocking thing. And let's try to unpack this. The Medrash says, this is in our 11th source, in our 10th source. It says, it's describing the revenge that Israel is supposed to mete out against the Midianites in Parashas Matos. And it says, Nakom nikmas b'nei Israel. Aval pish nispaser b'saras moves. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu knows that after he conquers the Midianites, he's going to die. Loi omar macharani meis maya ili she'en kol Midian. He says, look, you know what? We're going to talk about it. We're like diplomacy first, right? Because I'm going to die afterwards. He went, Moshe, and he went straight into battle, even though that he knew that his life was dependent on the end of the war. Yehoshua was not such. When he fought against the 31 kings, we'll see their names later. If I do that in one moment, that's it, I'm dead. He says, he took longer in the war. That's an incredible indictment. That means to say is that Yehoshua was taking this war slower because he knew that his role his life was only going to be for this job. He was not in charge of the next generation, so he took longer. That's an incredible indictment. I do want to share that it's not the only view on the table. So as an example, the Sfas Emes points out, just to be fair, in defense of Yehoshua, he points out that these wars are incredibly inspiring. There was such a good feeling of goodwill, right? Wars, by the way, in general, up till the 20th century, wars were incredibly good things for the people, right? You make everybody feel happy, you reunite the people, you forget about the local problems, housing issues, and inflation, go fight a war, and everybody feels good. So, but here, spiritually, people are going to feel amazing. Hashem's on your side, right? So he says he wanted to prolong that. Let's take it slowly to prolong the feeling of goodness. The Panim Yafos, another perspective, says that it's based on the pasuk in the Torah, which says Ma'at agarshenu meponecha. Hashem says, I'm not going to conquer this fast because what happens if there's a great void? Then the repopulation is going to be a problem, and then there's going to be then there's going to in that void, barbarians come, animals come because there's no settlement. So it has to be a slow process. So maybe there was in fact a perspective that Yehoshua is adding. What is really true? Our answer is, I think all are totally true at the same time. And that is because human beings are complex. And in fact, I don't think, and this is just myself speaking, it's probably not true that Yehoshua was sitting there saying this. It might just be that one of the subconscious considerations that Yehoshua had was also his own life as well. And I think that's the truth of human beings. On the one hand, doing what Hashem wants. On the other hand, prolonging the inspiration. On the other hand, making the population go incrementally. On the other hand, also prolonging one's career. I think all can be true at once because we are human beings and we are complex. And unfortunately, today you hear such accusations. And it's very, very apropos today. People make such accusations about the leadership. The war is being prolonged because of trying to push over the election. It's hard for us as human beings to know. In retrospect, when God writes the book, we can figure this out. But right now, it's very hard to make these accusations, and it's probably that a lot of things are true at once. Whether consciously or subconsciously, it's very hard to know. But this is a very painful piece over here to open up and to read as well. We conclude over here with two last details, and that is Anakim, right? So we're told that Yehoshua conquers the Anakim. They're given special details himself. By the way, before we go a little further, it's worthwhile noting that the Israel of the times of Yehoshua is different in terms of borders the Israel we have today. The Israel of the times of Yehoshua, we're going to see, is going to be the southern borders around Be'er Sheva, excluding the desert, and the northern border is up into Lebanon, right? So our Israel is shifted south somewhat, right? The Israel that we have today, and that's because it was part of the Sykes-Picot plan in 1914. It was really about British and French territorial adjustments, and that had nothing to do with biblical land. But in terms of the biblical land, we are further north, and we are further north in both the northern and southern border in terms of what Israel is going to look like, and that will expand the times of David, God willing. But now, who are these Anakim? We know that they live over here in the area of Hebron, in the southern regions. So what is happening with these Anakim? So we know about these Anakim because Moshe Rabbeinu talks about it. Moshe Rabbeinu says, in fact, when the spies come back from the land in the second year, we hear about it. What do they say? Listen to what's described in Devarim at the beginning of Devarim, which describes the words of the Meraglim. It says, "Ana anachnu alim achenu hamasas levaveinu lemor am gadol v'ram mimenu arim gadolas b'tzuras v'shamayim v'gam b'nei Anakim ra'inu sham." They said they've got fortified cities and they have the children of Anakim. That's one of the reasons why they say we can't do this. And in fact, later on, when Moshe Rabbeinu wants to give a little bit of chizuk to the people and remind them they need to go in, he says to them, Shema Yisrael, atem ovrim Yarden, you're going to cross the Jordan, lavol l'reshes goyim gedolim v'atzumim mimeka, you're going to conquer much more powerful nations than you, arim gedolos v'tzuras v'shamayim, walled cities, am gadol v'ram b'nei anakim, asher atayodatu, asher shomatim yatsev nifnei b'nei anak. You've heard about them. Where do you hear about them from? The Meraglim. You've heard about them 38 years ago from the Meraglim. This is now the end of the desert. You're going to go in. They get more powerful than you, and you're going to conquer them. Don't fear them. You're going to conquer them. That's what's being told. Amazing. Right, so who are these Bnei Anakim? So the Mitzuras Tzion says Bnei Anakim refer to Bnei Adam Gevahei Koma. These are giants. Right? So even today, in Hebrew, the parlance is Anak. It means huge. Right? It's like a compliment. This is something. Is it Anak? Right? Right, so that's Anak means a giant, a large person. In history, can we identify these people? So it actually is interesting. In the British Museum, they have a papyrus Anatasi, which is actually a letter, which was they have the original letter, but sent between two Egyptian military leaders. And it is a very interesting letter because it's very sarcastic. I mean, we don't know the whole thing over here, but it's really the one leader is turning to the other and saying, "How are you going to survive?" He's making a military tour in the land of Canaan, and he's saying to them, how are you going to survive? You know nothing about the terrain. That's what he's essentially saying in this letter. So listen to this translation of the papyrus. He says, "Come, let me tell thee of other towns which are above them. Thou hast not gone to the land of Kadesh, Teches, Qumran, Temenet, Deper, Idi, Hemeran. Thou hast not beheld Kiriath Anav and Beth Sefer. Thou dost not know Idaran and yet Jepet. Thou dost not know the name of," and he goes on, all these cities you don't know. "Pray, teach me concerning the appearance of kin, acquaint me with Rehov, explain Baal Sha'al and Terakel, the stream of the Jordan, how is it crossed? Cause me to know the crossing over to Megiddo, which is above it." They're basically saying you know nothing about the terrain. That's essentially what he's saying. He's like, you know nothing. How can you even go there? That's what he's saying. It's amazing to see ancient, 3,000-year-old sarcasm. But now, and then he goes on to say, he says, the narrow defile is infested with Shoshu. So he's saying that the area of the Jordan is infested by a tribe called the Shoshu, concealed beneath the bushes. Some of them are 4 cubits or 5 cubits from head to foot. Fierce of face, their heart is not mild, and they hearken not to coaxing. Thou art alone, there is no helper with thee, no army behind thee, thou findest no... And he goes on basically to say, you're dead. Basically, you're playing in the game that you don't know, and you're fighting against people you don't understand. So just basically give up. But what's interesting is he actually gives us the heart of the people called the Shoshu, and he says they are 4 to 5 cubits. We know today that the Egyptian cubit is about 53.3 centimeters, or roughly 20.6 inches, which means the people of the Shosh that he's talking about over here are between 7 to 8.6 feet tall, right? What is also interesting is the places that he names over here. The two places that he talks about are Kiryat Anab and Bet Sefer. Kiryat Anav, Bet Sefer is also known in the Bible as a place called Devir. If you go back to the Psukim that describe where he conquers them, the two places that he conquers are a place called Anav and Devir, which means the place that this fellow is sending the letter describing exceptionally large people in the Egyptian cubit are the two places that Yehoshua conquers the Anakim from, right? Fascinating, right? So here we have a letter describing the Shoshu tribe of extraordinary height in the same two places that Yehoshua is about to conquer as well, which is remarkable just in terms of like the correlation of appreciation of this as well. There's when we'll get to Goliath, we'll discuss the problems of pituitary glands and growth hormones. We'll get there, God willing, and try to figure out what happens with these growth hormones and when it goes wrong. But we'll get there, God willing, when we get to Sefer Shmuel. But in the meantime, the Bnei Anakim are conquered, and this is a formidable enemy that the Meraglim were scared of. And this is the dramatic irony, full circle. Here's Yehoshua, who saw the Bnei Anakim, who conquers the Bnei Anakim now these 40-something years later.
That's the Hebron area, right?
That's the Hebron area, right? We'll get to, and there's a lot of other people live there. Last question for today, and then we're going to close, is the Gaza situation, right? So we hear that Yehoshua conquers all the Anakim in the areas of Hebron, but he does not conquer them in the area of Ashdod and Gaza. Gaza is a city at this point in time, right? So, by the way, you ever wondered why it's called Gaza if it's Gaza? The answer is because it's an iron. And actually, if you're a little more learned in the Hebrew language, the iron is actually a rayin, which is actually it's guttural, and it turns from a ra to a ga. Gaza is just a transliteration of the iron as opposed to an aleph, right? So there's a lot of examples of that. But nonetheless, that is where Gaza City is today. Why is this the case? The answer is because Gaza and Ashdod are inhabited by a non-Canaanite tribe. They are called the Philistia, the Plishtim. The Plishtim do not come from Israel, which is why they're not mentioned as one of the 7 nations of Israel. In fact, where do they come from? They come from the Isle of Crete. If you look at in the map, over there in the biblical, you'll see that they come from the Isle of, they're called the peoples of the sea, and that what they do is they come in boats and they try to conquer coastal plains. In fact, we have the writings of a number of Egyptian pharaohs who write around this time, just before this era, how they successfully fended off the peoples of the sea, the Philistines. Who did not successfully do that? The Canaanites, which means that the peoples of the sea, the Philistines, came from Crete and tried to conquer the northern Egyptian coast, were unsuccessful. The Egyptians fended them off, and therefore they settled in the less defended area of Canaan, and they took up the coastal plain. If you look at the last map over here, you will see where the Philistines settled. They took essentially the entire area of the Shvela. By the way, this is the best land in Israel. This is the farmland. Right, this is where it's all at. So they took from where Gaza City is all the way up to Jaffa, and this is the Ashdod, Ashkelon, all those cities, and you'll recognize some of the city names. Gezer, Ekron, Gat, Lachish, Tziklag. These are all the border of Philistine, the Philistine territories, and we're going to see this is going to play major roles later on come Sefer Shmuel to appreciate this area. We don't appreciate that most of Israel was actually the mountainous territory for most of the first few hundred years. Why this is important is to appreciate this for a few reasons. Number one is it seems that the Philistines did have a military edge which the nation of Israel was not prepared to conquer at this point in time. So the land is not the full land of Israel as we see it. Number two is they are not indigenous peoples. And it's so dramatic. And such a dramatic irony that when the Romans decided to rename the land of Israel to conquer the nationalistic spirit of the land of Israel after the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the year 135, they called it the province not of Judea as it was before, but they called it Palestina. And the reason why they called that was because they picked up on a perennial enemy throughout Nach, which are the Philistines. The irony is that disenfranchised group of folks, of Arabs who live in the neighborhood, Some who were there for a number of centuries, many who immigrated in for business reasons at the end of the 19th century because the Jews were coming, who now call them Palestinians and call themselves indigenous people. It's a very funny, dramatic irony because the Philistines themselves were not indigenous to the territory, right? Meaning to say they also came from elsewhere, settled down, and thought that they were the owners of the land. Clearly, history has a way of repeating itself. This is also why, in terms of prioritization, Yehoshua did not feel it was necessary to make the conquest first because his command and mandate was the 7 nations. This is not one of the 7 nations which left the coast off the map, at least for the first level of conquest. This part of the job will only be finished later on by David and not really done by David because you'll see they continue to plague Israel as well. It's important to appreciate this because this lays the table for understanding the rest of history. We're still stuck with people who come from outside who think they belong on the inside without reading a little bit of history. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a